Hey guys, it's JC. I just want to come to you guys with some information, speculation mainly about what Naughty Dog is doing next generation. If we know Naughty Dog, which I'm sure if you're watching this video, you know Naughty Dog. They've usually had a formula in the past where they'll introduce one new IP every generation, and then the next generation they'll be done with that previous IP, come back with a new one. Done with the previous, back with a new one. They've done it for 3 generation cycles thus far. But this PlayStation 3 cycle was a little bit different. First of all, PlayStation 3 cycle lasted longer than any other cycle prior. Therefore, Naughty Dog had enough time to introduce 2 new IPs. And one of them, which is what I'm playing over, what I'm commentating over, is The Last of Us. The Last of Us actually came out just recently. And lo and behold, PS4 is about to come out soon. Therefore, what that means is it's not so clear and apparent what their next move is going to be, because what we're used to is, one franchise PS1 days, one franchise PS2 days, and now you have 2 franchises or 2 new intellectual properties that began in PS3 days. So will they not pick up either one? Will they pick up both again? Only time will tell. But to understand fully, we have to go all the way back to PS1. In PS1 days, they had Crash Bandicoot series, and anybody who's played them can attest to it that Crash was an amazing, phenomenal platformer. And it was actually the PlayStation's answer to Super Mario. And let's not compare, let's not pit them together, but these were 2 amazing platformers. But specifically speaking of Crash, we had a mascot for Sony now. That's one. Two, it was one of the best platformers of the generation, and it continuously built upon its previous installment. Naughty Dog continued to build upon it. They added new moves for Crash. They added new worlds to explore. They added new storyline. And they were starting to really hone in on their craft. Now we know what actually ended up happening to Crash is that Naughty Dog gave us 3 great installments. Each one was better than the last. And what happened is Sony ended up selling the rights to that intellectual property. And I believe they sold it to Activision. I know it's been sold around so often. I know Activision held it at one point. I believe they sold it to Activision, but anyway, it doesn't matter. It was sold off. Naughty Dog no longer had the rights to create Crash games, so the next generation came on, and they said, okay, Crash is done, for us at least. Activision did create one, Crash, the 4th installment. It was pretty good, but a lot of people, whenever they think of Crash, they think of Naughty Dog Crash. Naughty Dog days. That was the glory days for that series. Now it's pretty much dead. So Naughty Dog said, let's move on with PS2. We're going to bring you a whole new IP. Enters Jak and Daxter. And the first installment was along the lines of Crash. It was a lot more of a platformer, which was great. A lot of the fans loved it because they left them off with a platformer. So let's start with another one. But this time around, it was a more engrossing, a more detailed, more enveloping storyline. And the fans ate it up. The fans loved it. Jak 2 and 3 came around, and it became more of a mix between shooting and platforming. And some people loved it, some people didn't like it as much. And what can you say? But it was still great. Naughty Dog, by this time, they're really honing in on their skills. They're really building a reputation. If they hadn't already, then they ended up making a racing game for Jak X, and to rewind, they made a Crash racing game as well. So 3 great installments for a new IP on a generation, a racing title, and then bam, let's move on next generation. We're done. A lot of fans thought they would make a Jak game on PS3. It just never happened. I'd actually would have loved it, but it just never happened. But what we did get was Uncharted. The Uncharted series really is their flagship title. And some people would argue with me about that, but what you got to understand is there's some people that hadn't played a Naughty Dog game prior to Uncharted, or played it but didn't even realize it was a Naughty Dog made game. Their name in the gaming industry became standard by the time Uncharted released, because it was the standard of gaming. 2007, when the first Uncharted released, phenomenal game. The graphics were just bar none. It still looks relatively good compared to so many games that's still coming out to this day. And the generation is almost over. Uncharted 2, Uncharted 3, they continued to build on it. They improved their combat system. They improved their storytelling. They improved uh, the versatility of the game. Period. They added a multiplayer mode. Naughty Dog really just steps it up every single time. Every time they release something, it gets better and better. And the last thing people could have imagined, I know I thought that they would rest on their laurels, because they created three great Uncharted games for this generation, and that's what they do. Some people thought they'd create an Uncharted racing game for their fourth game and call it a day with the PS3, but lo and behold, what you see playing in front of you is their latest game, and it happens to be a new IP, and it has nothing to do with Uncharted at all. It just shares the same creator's name, So I personally love The Last of Us. It transcends so many other games on this platform of this generation. Some people call it overrated, but you have to take into account how masterful this game is. It takes storytelling to a whole nother plateau, whole nother echelon. Really, I, I've never cared for characters quite that much. I've played other games where, I've shed a tear at the end of the game. I've gotten emotionally attached to characters, but they never seemed quite as lifelike as they they do when playing The Last of Us. So I'm not gonna spoil it for anybody. That's to be experienced on your own, but masterful game. But now, there's a fork in the road. We can't even imagine what Naughty Dog is gonna do next generation, because they flipped the script on us. And what's interesting is that they said that and this is no spoiler or anything. Naughty Dog was very open and very clear about this. They said Joel and Ellie's story is over. They don't really see them going back to them, but they never implicitly stated that The Last of Us is over and done with. So we could get a sequel just from a different, character's perspective. We could get some type of spin-off of The Last of Us, but what if they revisited the Uncharted universe? Because they never said that was done either. And to throw another wrench into it altogether, they never quite said they were done with the Jack series. Let's keep in mind, the only reason they never revisited the Uncharted. The only reason they never revisited the Crash series is because they don't own the rights anymore. They can't. But all these other series that they have, they can go back to it at any time. And they actually thought about revisiting Jack. It just never came to fruition, and therefore Uncharted came to be, but they never said that they would not revisit it. So it's just so interesting, guys. Of course, I'm going to want your opinions. What would you prefer to see? Do we go with a whole new IP first? Do we revisit one of these older, well-established IPs first? And I don't doubt that they won't revisit at least Uncharted or The Last of Us in some regard, especially The Last of Us. Not to discredit Uncharted, but The Last of Us got so many accolades. It'd be ridiculous not to revisit it and just make it a one game series. I wouldn't be upset, but I'm thinking from a financial standpoint. It just it just wouldn't make sense. Um, But let's think about it like this. What would be best for Naughty Dog? Of course, it would be best to revisit an already established IP, already established franchise first, because you made a brand name for it. So people would automatically go out and buy it. It would be a system seller. And Sony wants to sell their systems. But at this point, Naughty Dog has made such a name in the gaming industry that as long as their name is slapped on something, you know as a true gamer, even if you're not for Sony consoles per se, you know that they make quality. Point blank, period. So a lot of people at this point in time, they see Naughty Dog's name and they anticipate their next game. I didn't know much about The Last of Us until I actually bought it. It was one of those type of games where I just knew it was gonna be great. So there was no need to even do research. I just went out and bought it when it came out and I was blown away. So I just really want to know some thoughts, opinions. What should they do? If you were in their shoes, what type of game would you want to make? And how long do you think it's going to take for us to actually see any game, any new IP, if at all? Which I'm sure we will. But, give your thoughts, give your opinions. He's teabagging him. That's pretty fucked up. Um, and if you like this video, please comment and subscribe. I'll check you later. Peace.